I dabbled in the Tomb Raider series as I grew up, with playing a few of the games on the PS1, but never really beating any of them. I really like the idea of the games as you being able to play out your own Indiana Jones movies. I fell in love with the character when I played the game Tomb Raider Legends, which I thought was a great action-adventure game. Then the studio wanted to reboot the character. I got really excited for this reboot, and when I finally got my hands on that, it became one of my favorite games from the Xbox 360 and PS3 era of gaming. Join me as we take a brief look at the development of Tomb Raider, and then a deeper discussion on the game itself. I present to you a look back at Tomb Raider. In 2003, it was announced that Core Design, the original people who made Tomb Raider starting back from 1996, would not be making any more Tomb Raider games. Many sources say that this was due to the poor reception to their last Tomb Raider game, The Angel of Darkness. It is sad to learn that the original developers would not be working on the franchise anymore, but with this came opportunity. The development of future Tomb Raider games moved to Crystal Dynamics. From 2006 to 2008, Crystal Dynamics created a new trilogy of Tomb Raider games. These games had a familiar feel to the originals and didn't really deviate from the established formula. In 2009, Crystal Dynamics decided to make a decision that would affect the series and shift it in a new direction. At the time, they were working on a sequel for Tomb Raider Underworld, but the development studio wanted to explore and go in another direction with Lara Croft. In 2011, the first trailer was presented for the rebooted Tomb Raider game. The trailer features what appears to be a younger and more inexperienced Lara, as she boards a ship that is eventually heavily damaged in a storm. Lara fights for her survival to escape the ship, and then we are treated to a different kind of Lara and one focused more on survival. The intent of Crystal Dynamics was to humanize this video game icon and show her at the very start of her story. They wanted to use this game to forge a story where we experienced her turning into the heroine we know. This new Tomb Raider game was going for a grittier tone than the past entries. The game wanted to focus less on the glamorization of treasure hunting and focus on what Crystal Dynamics says was a story of survival. In March 2013, the rebooted Tomb Raider was released to the world. The story premise is that Lara and her band of friends are on an adventure to find the lost kingdom of Yamatai. When their ship has trouble and the crew flees to the island, after escaping the ship and reaching the safety of land, Lara is quickly captured by these deranged people and she must begin to fight for her survival. This is an important distinction to make, is that Lara starts the game as a rookie adventurer, which means it gives her a lot of room to grow. She must survive the island, the wildlife, and the crazy cultists that inhabit the island. Honestly, describing the premise of the story makes the game seem like a horror movie, and with tweaks to gameplay, this game could have really turned into that. But the game follows a more traditional action-adventure movie format. Something I did like about the story is how the game's cutscenes made a point to show the first time she had to kill an animal for food,
Sorry.
or the first time she had to kill a person to survive. These parts of the game were hit with criticism as there's a disconnect between the story of the game and the actual gameplay. For example, when Lara kills her first person, it really shocks her, and then immediately following this situation, you start gunning down people like you're a pro. Personally, I noticed the disconnect, but this type of thing happens in games all the time, and it doesn't really hurt my experience. A good example of this is in the Uncharted series. You'll be shooting loads of people in the game, but no one calls any of those characters mass murderers. What I do think would have helped this disconnect and this aspect of the game is if there were a few instances of Lara really reflecting on having to kill, and her coming to the conclusion that she will need to take lives to survive the island. Also, I would have liked to have seen this aspect done through gameplay. Since she doesn't have a lot of experience with guns, have that feed into the RPG level mechanics more. Maybe she starts the game as not being able to hold her gun steady, and then through level ups and experience she becomes more proficient with her weapons. This fits with how the reboot is starting at the beginning level with her being an inexperienced person and her gaining those skills that we know she will learn to have. I feel like small adjustments would have been a good touch to convey that we are playing as someone who is inexperienced, and then as the player levels up, so does Lara. A decent example of this is back on the PS2, they made a game based on the 24 TV show. Throughout the game you played as different characters, and one interesting aspect of the game was a level where you would play as the main character's daughter, who didn't have much weapon experience. So when you had to use a pistol with her, her aim was all over the place, and it reflected her skill. It created a decent sense of vulnerability and frustration on the player as playing as a weaker fighter. If the developers of Tomb Raider did something similar to this and then showed the progression of Lara's skills, this would have potentially created a better sense of satisfaction from a gameplay perspective feeding into the narrative. And then something like this would help bridge that gap between the disconnect between gameplay and narrative. While I find this idea potentially helping with the disconnect, the implementation of these mechanics could have hurt the otherwise great pacing of this game. Overall, I enjoy the narrative to the game because it's essentially about a woman who is thrown into a crazy situation and she continually rises to that occasion to succeed. One thing that I liked about the story is how Lara continually fails throughout the story. She gets captured a few times by enemies, she fails to save the airplane pilots that crash land on the island, she fails to save some of her friends, she experiences her biggest loss in the game, the loss of her mentor. And then, through all of that, she never gives up.
Come on! Come on! Come on!
It's them.
I do think that the story would have benefited from having a smaller cast of side characters, as many of them are not that interesting and rather annoying at times. Have Lara, then her mentor Roth, to provide her guidance. Have Jonah, because he's that likable fat guy, and then Sam is the person you're trying to save. On top of that, by having a smaller cast, it gives off the impression more that Lara is alone and she's trying to survive this island, and it gives off a better feeling of seclusion. The gameplay is very fun and well done. You'll spend most of your time running throughout the different environments because of the very forward-moving narrative. You'll explore environments, grab collectibles, and these collectibles will provide you with some insight on the island, culture of the island. Along with that, you'll get to see what other characters are feeling at the same time as you.
I can't believe we're actually on an expedition to find the homeland of my ancestors. Ever since I told Lara the story of Himiko years ago, she's been hunting for its location. I never really gave it much thought. That any of this could actually be real history. My grandmother used to tell me the story like it was a memory. Many thousands of years ago, Queen Himiko ruled the land of Yamatai. The sun rose at Himiko's command, and she ruled everything its rays touched, from the mountains to the sea and beyond. But one day, Yamatai simply disappeared without a trace. Forgotten in time.
The collectibles are traditional, but what I do like is that they do reward you with some experience points and then provide you with some information on the game from different perspectives. The game's layout is very similar to the design of Batman Arkham Asylum or a Castlevania or Metroid game. You're in one large area that is broken up into smaller areas. You'll encounter doors you can't open or items that you can't get to until you earn a certain item. Your arsenal will help you fully explore these environments, and when you receive something new, you're encouraged to go back to previous areas to unlock something that you couldn't get to before. I love the idea of being in one secluded location, like Shadow Moses Island from Metal Gear Solid 1. And this Tomb Raider game gave me a similar feeling. I think part of the reason why I enjoy situations, stories, and games that are in one location is because that location, because it's so small and becomes so intimate with you and the player and all that and the characters, is that it starts to become a character itself. You start to relate to certain places. You start to really learn about the places. And I mean, like, yeah, you can say that about open world games, and I feel like you'll probably learn sections of it. But when the areas are smaller and dense, I think there is something really special with having something like that. I find the combat to be more engaging than a typical third-person shooter. This is due to the enemy variety and Lara's moveset. You'll face off against enemies that will try to attack you with melee weapons, grenades, and then ranged weapons. You'll use a non-sticky cover system that works and isn't annoying to use, along with a very useful dodge roll. The enemy variety, especially the grenade enemies, will keep you moving throughout the firefights. I like how the game doesn't feel like you'll die instantly if you're not in cover, and the game actually encourages you to move around the battlefield. Now don't get me wrong, you'll need to be moving from cover to cover, but the dodge roll really assists in adding more mobility to combat. You get a standard issue of weapons from pistols to assault rifles to shotguns, along with a bow and arrow. The bow and arrow comes in handy for many of the optional stealth parts where you'll kill an enemy, and if you hit them with that arrow, it won't result in other enemies being alerted. You'll be enjoying the action through many of the standard yet fun shootouts, with some very memorable set pieces sprinkled throughout the game. The game doesn't really have boss fights, but rather set-piece events that happen. Some of them include running and jumping while the environment is being destroyed around you. Sometimes you'll face off against a large amount of enemies in a spectacular fashion. Either way, it's exciting. There's something to be said too about these set pieces and about these environments that are destroying around you while you're running, is just the sheer beauty in it. When I played the game on the 360, I was kind of blown away by how well done the game was, but then when I was able to play it with enhanced graphics on, say, the PS4, it really shows off how gorgeous this game is, and especially when having things break around you and the frame rate is still good and the presentation is great, it's just that extra icing on that good cake of a game. Now, if you were a PC player and you had a good PC, you could do this, but I don't have the best PC. The game has some of the best hair you'll see outside of a Final Fantasy title. It's just damn fine hair. I enjoy the attention to detail with Lara getting blood on her from combat or mud depending on the environment. When she is exposed to water or rain, while dirty, she will slowly get cleaner. I really notice this in the beginning as she dips her arm in water and you see that she is dirty, and then gets progressively less dirty as she dips in her arm in the water again. Also, the level of detail of mud and blood has a good effect on her. The mud will look like it has dried a bit and then has cracks in it. These are just small details that add to the immersion. I also like that Lara will occasionally make notes in her journal, and we as the player get an inside look as to what she's feeling at that time because she kind of narrates what's going on and how she personally feels.
There it is!
I really have to commend the pacing in this game as it moves. After you earn the pistol, the game is a roller coaster ride till the end of the game. Plus the game is continually throwing new items and upgrades at you, and you're always playing with something new. You earn a small arsenal of weapons that get continually upgraded, along with the fire and rope arrows to help you with the environment. The game likes to bookend many big action parts, with Lara running away from something or running from the environment that is being destroyed around her. They get the blood pumping and put the icing on the cake. At the same time, the game knows when to calm down and bring the player back down from that action high so that the game can bring you right back up again. It's a familiar formula, especially seen in the Uncharted series, but it allows the game to be continually exciting without feeling repetitive and exhaustive. I do enjoy the optional tombs, but I do wish they had more of them. Many of the tombs can be completed with ease and are more like puzzle rooms rather than an elaborate tomb. I do wish the game had a mix of larger and smaller tombs, allowing for a nice variety. Though at the same time, I wonder if the great pacing would hold up if there were more tombs and longer tombs in the game. Overall, I love the reboot of Tomb Raider. I do feel like it played it safe in many parts of the game, and at the same time was inspired by many other modern action titles at the time, like Uncharted and the Batman Arkham series, to help create a new look to Lara. I have beaten this game several times, and I find it to be a roller coaster ride that is worth returning back to with a hero I want to root for. While there are areas that I think could improve for the story, I do think that the developers did a great job at making me care about this character. I wanted her to succeed and survive the island. When this game concluded, I was satisfied in how they developed her, and I eagerly awaited how they would approach the sequel. Thank you very much for watching. With the new film being inspired by the rebooted Tomb Raider games, I felt like it was a good time to revisit the 2013 reboot. I wanted to do something a bit different than my normal reviews, as I felt like a standard review wouldn't fit with this game because it was a bit older. On top of that, I like to use potential projects like this as a way to test different things out so that I can continually find avenues to experiment and grow as a creator. So I hope you enjoyed it, thank you again, and maybe check out some of my other videos, and I'll see you next time.